Only in death does duty end.
Leviathan Dreadnoughts are the most iconic models, in my opinion of course, from Warhammer 40,000 and from the Horus Heresy franchise. I have always wanted to paint the Forge World Dark Angels Leviathan Dreadnought, and finally I decided to give it a go. My name is Mateusz, you are watching Galharen channel, and today I would like to present you how I have painted my version of Dark Angels Leviathan Dreadnought for my Horus Heresy army. But before we start, I need to give a huge thank you to all my patrons. Without you, making all those videos wouldn't be even possible, and we are slowly building a small community around our lovely hobby. So I'm really happy that you are with me in this journey, and I hope you will enjoy the video as well. So thanks a lot for the support and have fun! I have started the work with the black undercoat using the Vallejo black spray. Also, I have checked the Forge World website for the painting scheme, to be true to the lore. Also, I have magnetized the arms to have more game options in the future. When painting the Dark Angels, it is crucial to get the black armor right and interesting. This is why I have worked out my own recipe which I use for my private Dark Angels army. I begin with mixing the Black Stallion and Arachnid green paints in ratio around 50-50, and after adding a few drops of the airbrush thinner, I start building highlights of the armor. In this case, my idea is that every part of the armor will have the transition from black to the top highlights. This is a model for a game purpose, but every new model is a new experience and a chance to improve, so I decided to play a bit with the armor rather than making it simply black. Luckily, the Leviathan Dreadnought has many big and flat surfaces to work with the airbrush, what improves a lot the transition of colors and let us save some time. This is a good moment to mention which airbrush I normally use. For detail work and highlights I use the Harder and Steenbeck Ultra airbrush with 0.2mm nozzle. And for base coating and varnishing I use the Green Stuff World airbrush with 0.5mm nozzle. After the first layers dried, I proceed by adding more Arachnid green to the mix. It is not the pure Arachnid green because I don't want the armor to be green in the end, but rather more black with grey and just a little bit of green tint. I keep on building the highlights by applying the paint on upper parts of every surface. This might not be an exact natural light distribution, but when I'm not painting the competition piece, I make some approximations which will give me in the end an eye-catching paint job on the table without brainstorming if this light reflection is in correct place or not. And to be honest, during the game there is never enough light to make all our tricks visible, so don't worry. The bigger the contrast, the more eye-catching the effect is. This is why as a final highlight I will use the mix of the Arachnid green and the steel grey from Green Stuff World in ratio 1:1. As you can see, I just want to point out the top highlights without exaggerating too much. It is very easy to overdo things while painting, so work in small iterations at this stage. Let the paint dry to see the final effect. I know that it looks more like a Space Wolves Dreadnought right now, but there are still some steps which make the final look of the armor much darker. The first of them is using the black transparent ink. In this case I will use the Intensity ink from GSW. After mixing the ink with the thinner, let's say in ratio around 1:1, I'm going the other way around, increasing the shadows and blending the transition of colors. This step will create a very interesting contrast on the armor parts. Thanks to the ink transparency, you have a lot of possibilities how to modify the tone of the armor. I'm not trying to cover the final highlights as I really like the vibrant color of them. This step is very forgiving, so you can work without stress as long as you don't overload the airbrush and you work with the optimal pressure. For this method I tend to lower the airbrush pressure somewhere between 1 to 1.5 psi. Finally, using the lighter grey tones, which are the steel grey and the slate grey, I will make the classic heavy metal edge highlighting. I'm using the side of the brush as in this case I am looking for the clean, straight edges for now. Edge highlighting is a very easy method to make the painting look good. It divides the parts from each other, it brings the great contrast visible from away. However, when you are looking for the more grimdark effect, I would suggest using the sponge to make the edge highlights more irregular and more battle damaged. Sponge chipping is a great tool for the tabletop models, but of course not only. If you want me to make a video about this topic, let me know in the comments. For now the armor is done. In later stage I will introduce some weathering into it, but before that I need to apply other colors to see how the scheme work together. First of all, I will paint all the metallic parts with the base color, which is the Anthrax metal. It is a little bit lighter than a Boltgun metal from Games Workshop and I like it as a base for future highlights and washes. Magnetizing the arms helps a lot too, as I will be able to reach every part of the model without difficulties. Next, I would like to paint the red knee pads with an airbrush to get it smooth and fast. To avoid destroying my previous work, I will use the masking putty from Grimdark World. It is reusable and it doesn't stick to the paint, so I am not worried about taking it off together with the paint. I simply cover the area around the knee pads with the putty and I move on with airbrushing. I have mentioned it many times already that my favorite red color is the vermilion from Vallejo. As a base layer I will mix it with a drop of the black paint and I will cover the target areas. Directly after I am using the pure vermilion to highlight the surface, and in the later stage I will bring the edge highlight and or the battle damage to complete the effect. I would say that the checkers are the brand mark for the Dark Angels. This is why I decided to freehand the checker on the left arm. To do it more or less even, I have used the masking tape to indicate the edge of the checker in the first row. Then I use the brush to paint the white squares in quite even spacing. There are some transfers or stencils, perfect for that, but I didn't have a proper one at that moment, so I had to improvise. When the first row was done, I moved the masking tape one row further and again using the brush I have painted the squares between those already done. When the checker on the arm was ready, I have used a tiny brush and the black paint to make some random thin scratches and lines to make the checker look a bit worn. It is in the end the Horus Heresy, nothing here is brand new and shiny, right? Also this trick lets me to make the checker looks less artificial. It binds the geometric pattern together. Now is the time to bring some grimdark effects here. I will use the oil paints to make the oil washes and the weathering on the armor. But before applying them, I need to seal the model with the gloss or satin varnish. In this case I have used the satin varnish from Vallejo and I have applied it with an airbrush. A solid coat of varnish will protect the paint from external weather conditions. Remember, always safety first. After the varnish is completely dry, I move on with the oil wash. As you can see, I have used a drop of black paint from Rembrandt series and I have mixed it with the turpentine. In general, it is about the white spirit. It is crucial to mix it really well. I am aiming for the milk consistency. Using an old synthetic brush, I just let the oil wash to flow into the recesses. I like the process, it is also very relaxing because anything can be fixed here. It is very easy to remove the excess of the oil paint in this moment. Oil washes can be used as filters as well, changing the general tone of the base color if you cover the wall surface. I have used that effect here to darken the armor a little bit. What I also find very good is that the oil paint dries matte, in contrary to the standard acrylic washes which dry gloss in most cases. It is a good moment to bring the Dark Angels transfers. I have finally managed to buy them in the Games Workshop store, so let's decorate my Dreadnought with them right now. For the transfers I used the decal fixer and softener from Grimdark World. Firstly, I put the fixer on the surface in the right place, and after that I gently lay over the decal. When it is right positioned, I tend to use the softener, and applying it with the brush, I smooth out the decal. In this case, I decided to use some hexagrammaton symbols, the lion symbol, the number of the First Legion, and some tiny decals here and there. You will see. I really recommend trying and using decals for your armies because they bring so much extra details and they are really easy and fast to apply. I have already mentioned the sponge chipping today, haven't I? Right. So I will use the sponge to make some battle damage effect. In this case I have used the black paint to create the irregular black dots, various in shape and size, but I focus mostly on the edges as they tend to be damaged more frequently. The color of the chipping depends on the effect you want to achieve. Normally you would use the lighter tone to make the chipping visible on the dark armor. I decided for black because I want to use the metallic paint to obtain the effect of the pure steel, from which the paint has been removed during the battle. I will use again the anthrax metal, which was the base tone for my metallics, and with the tiny brush, size 0, I simply paint the inside of the bigger black dots with this metallic paint. It seems to be quite challenging job, but I really like the effect it creates. With the black outlining around the metal, the effect looks more realistic. Also, it is not necessary to cover all model with the battle damage. There must always be the balance. Too much is sometimes simply too much. But of course it is also a matter of taste. I prefer to make such effects in a few places which will not dominate the general feeling of the model. Now I will use again the oil paints to make some dirty weathering effects. I placed on the palette two brown tones, one darker and one lighter from Rembrandt and one from Winsor and Newton range. Then I have placed some tiny dots of paint there where I have the battle damage effect. After that, with a fresh, dry brush, I simply drag the paint down gently, creating the effect of stain. If you use the white spirit on your brush, you will drag or remove the oil paint more easily. Depends on the effect you want to achieve. Generally speaking, I am not a pro when it comes to the oil paints, but if you are looking for some really good knowledge, check out the historical modelers channels. They simply make wonders with weathering effects. After all the airbrushing and the chemistry, now is the time for the classic brushwork. There are plenty of details which need to be made before I move on to the OSL effects. Dark Angels are full of symbols where the wings appear very often, so it is a good way to remember which colors you use for every detail when you have a full army to paint in front of you. Painting the white wings was started with the Moonstone Grey. I quickly covered all the corresponding areas, and after that I simply mixed some contrast paints. In this case the Black Templar from Games Workshop and the Howling Sand from Army Painter. And with a few drops of the thinner, I just let it flow into recesses. When that kind of wash dried, I used the white paint to highlight every feather of the wings. For the speed painting effect, I would simply paint the base tone with the white paint and use the black oil wash to divide the details. Highlighting every feather after another is not maybe very sophisticated, but for sure it is time consuming. I must admit that apart from the lore, I have chosen the Dark Angels as my legion because I fell in love with the look of the models in the Horus Heresy book. The black armor with the white and red details work so great together. This is why I want to bring some more red details using my favorite color, the Vermilion Red from Vallejo. I think I have already mentioned it today, right? I love painting red in general. I don't know why, but it is very easy for me to highlight it. The reds blend really well together, creating a cool effect very quickly. So for the start, as always, I mix the vermilion with a bit of black paint. Directly after, I use the pure vermilion diluted on the wet palette. With two layers, we get a really nice saturated tone. The final step is to add a little bit of the white paint to the vermilion red and mark the final highlights. This is very similar to the typical tutorials of painting the non-metallic metal effect. Okay, now finally I'm ready to show you what you came here for. The OSL effects. It means the object source lighting coming from various places. If you are following my channel or if you are the member of my Patreon, you will probably know already that most of the times while making the OSL effect I start with the white halo. It will be the base for the light reflections. Here I'm using the ready-to-use intensity ink from GSW called the OSL White, such a proper name for its purpose. With the masking putty I cover the areas which I don't want to be affected by the OSL. It is important to control the process. Now I cover the halo with the transparent ink. Have a look how bright and eye-catching the color already is. Now I have used again the oil wash, this time the white oil paint, to bring it into the recesses. It is crucial when I want to make the source of the heat or light even brighter. After it dried, I bring another transparent ink, which is the orange-yellow. It is a lighter than the ink I used before and again I apply it with an airbrush. The last what I need to do is the white edge highlighting, which will complete the effect and add the extra brightness. OSL effects are amazing, I love them. They can turn the boring no-name miniature into an interesting work of art or to make from it the centerpiece model on the battlefields. In this case they create an amazing contrast to the black armor and thanks to that they bring even more attention to the model. In general, I think that the crucial point here is to make a smooth halo with an airbrush and to use the transparent ink to cover it. With the OSL done, we are slowly going to finish the model finally. Another important step is to unify all the textures and materials I used before. I have used the decals, which are quite noticeable right now because they reflect the light. To avoid that, I will cover the whole model with the varnish. But it will be the mix of the satin and matte varnish in a ratio 1:1. I do it because I'm always afraid of dusting effect while using the pure matte varnish and also because it has the tendency to flat out all the saturated colors. Such mix of varnishes work really good for me and if you are in need, check it out. With the model varnished, I have attached it to the base. This is a standard base for my Dark Angels and if you are interested in how to paint it, please check out another video I made about the mass base production. I have to say I like how this dreadnought looks like already, but as a last touch I will use the dry pigments to tie it with the base. I'm using the red rust pigment from Cromlech. Adding a few drops of the thinner, I make some kind of wash which I let flow into recesses. When the thinner vaporizes, it binds the pigment together and makes it look dry. Again, the pigment creates a nice contrast to the black armor, what I find very interesting. And so it is, the final effect. Dark Angels Leviathan Dreadnought is ready. It was a really fun project and I can't wait to use it on the battlefield. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to leave the like button, subscribe the channel and of course let me know in the comment what do you think. If you want to join my Patreon page and Discord channel, you are most welcome.